Welcome back, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. Blasts have been reported in Gaza after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will take full military control of the enclave, proposing an eventual handover to non-Hamas Arab governance. Officials do warn, though, it could endanger hostage safety. US envoy Tom Barrack has hailed the historic move from Lebanon to look to disarm Hezbollah by the end of the year. Meanwhile, Israel has launched an airstrike in eastern Lebanon, killing at least 5 and wounding 10 others, despite a ceasefire since last November. China's foreign ministry has publicly supported India over a steep US tariff increase over New Delhi's continued purchase of Russian oil. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo says China's opposition to abuse of tariffs is consistent and clear. President Trump says a future meeting with Vladimir Putin would not be contingent on Putin first meeting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The Kremlin signaled the meeting could take place in the UAE, though final logistics remain under discussion. The US has raised its reward for information leading to the arrest of Venezuelan President Maduro to $50 million amid renewed drug trafficking and cartel allegations. The move reflects heightened enforcement and follows prior incremental increases earlier this year. In response to steep 50% US tariffs on Indian and Brazilian goods, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Brazilian President Lula da Silva held a phone call reaffirming their strategic partnership. Lula confirmed a state visit to India in early 2026 amid talks to expand trade, tech and energy ties. Switzerland's Federal Council has held an emergency meeting after US tariffs on Swiss goods soared to 39%, the highest on any developed nation. The Swiss president affirmed willingness to negotiate, but underscored not at any price. And President Trump has signed a memorandum requiring colleges and universities to submit detailed admissions data, including race, GPA and test scores. This to confirm compliance with the Supreme Court's affirmative action ruling. Institutions may face federal aid penalties for non-compliance. But we start this hour in the Middle East, and multiple blasts were seen and heard in Gaza after Israel's political security cabinet approved a plan to take control of Gaza City. The cabinet's approval came hours after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel intended to take military control of the entire Strip. Meanwhile, Israeli citizens have been protesting in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, demanding an immediate release of hostages held by Hamas in Gaza and an end to the war. According to reports, Israeli police clashed with demonstrators in Tel Aviv during the protest. Reports indicate that police could be seen using water cannons to disperse crowds as protesters chanted slogans, lit flares and held up banners bearing images of those still held hostage. Well, joining us to discuss all of these developments, we have Alan Pinkas, the former Israeli ambassador, joining us live from Tel Aviv. Alan, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us here on NewsX World. Let's first cover the initial points I raised with visuals and hearings of strikes and blasts taking place in Gaza after this announcement from Benjamin Netanyahu and confirmation from the Security Cabinet that Israel plans to take military control of the whole of Gaza. Do you think this is now the start of that operation?
I don't know if tactically it is the start, but let's not forget, sir, that the war hasn't stopped. It hasn't receded. It hasn't. There was no pause or cessation of hostilities in the last few days. So what you're seeing in Gaza now may just be a continuation of previous operations. According to the plan that the Security Cabinet approved unanimously, as was expected, it's not like there was a major debate or deliberation. Only the military chief of staff objected very adamant reservations to the plan. But according to the plan that they approved, the entire population of Gaza City, the biggest city inside the Gaza Strip, needs to first be evacuated before any military takeover of Gaza takes place. Now, in that context, let's not forget that Israel already controls around 70% of the Gaza Strip. So this is not occupying an unknown territory, an uncharted area. Gaza has been devastated, and Gaza is already controlled by the Israeli military over 70% of its territory. So we need to wait and see how this occupation that Israel is hesitant to call it occupation so as not to bear the consequences of the occupation. We'll have to see. I doubt you will see anything major militarily in the next few days, though.
Yes, Alan, let's look at responses that could be coming from this move from Israeli military personnel. Of course, you mentioned there that there was some kickback to this plan. There have also been experts talking about the risks that might be there for hostages. Do you think that this is the last straw for the IDF? And also, do you think that there will be potential safety risks for these hostages being held? Of course, a key point of Israel's goal in continuing this military action within the Gaza enclave.
Well, you know, however imperfect Israeli democracy is, it is still a democracy in the sense that the military takes its orders from the civilian government, from the political echelons. So when you call it a last straw, I think we're going to have to wait and see, because the level of toxicity and the level of animosity that now exists between the top layer of the military and the prime minister is such that it could explode any day. And that would then we would look back, you and I, and say it was the last straw. Now, but it's important for our viewers to understand why the military is opposed to this. Ostensibly, it's about endangering the lives or even sacrificing the lives of at least 21 living hostages. The chief of staff has been saying in his own voice that any kind of occupation of the entire Gaza Strip and any kind of encirclement of areas where the hostages are believed to be severely endangers their lives. That's one thing, but there's a bigger issue here. I mean, nothing is bigger than human life, of course, but there's a bigger political and strategic issue. The military is basically saying there's no such thing as half occupation. There's no such thing as temporary occupation. There's no such thing as occupying militarily but not providing the civilian governance and the humanitarian aid on the other side. Meaning, the chief of staff says, Lieutenant General Zamir, he's saying, you want to occupy Gaza? We're going to have to run Gaza, and we are not necessarily prepared, equipped for this mission. What are the political goals? Because according to the cabinet meeting from last night or throughout the night, it stated 5 principles to end the war. The last and fifth principle states that a civilian government will be established that is neither Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority. Well, so who's going to manage Gaza? Not India, not Thailand, and not Argentina. So this is imaginary. And the military chief of staff basically said, look, it's going to fall on our shoulders, and we're not prepared to do this. So this could be a major confrontation in the next few weeks between, again, the IDF and the government.
Yes, Alan, I'm conscious of time. I have a couple more points that we're going to go through very quickly. Of course, reactions as well will be expected from world leaders, from NGOs, from groups like the UN after this announcement and once this operation gets underway. How do you think that this expansion and military ruling of Gaza will be seen? Do you think it will bring more condemnation, and will it put more pressure on the global scale for Benjamin Netanyahu?
Undoubtedly. Let's not forget that this decision is coming after, in the last 10 days, France, the UK, and Canada all announced that they intend to recognize a future Palestinian state. This on top of 147 countries in the UN that had already recognized the Palestinian state. So I do see that on both a political and a humanitarian basis, you're going to see more condemnation and isolation of Israel. And the most important thing, I know we are time conscious. The most important thing is that this is being done presumably with a green light from the US, but effectively it makes Mr. Trump's pledges and commitments to end the war look very hollow and ineffective in retrospect.
Yes, and Alan, finally, reports of protests in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv as well, with reports of police clashes specifically in Tel Aviv, of course, where you're joining us live from. Did you see anything? And also, what is the feeling and rhetoric coming from?
I actually live right next to where the demonstrations were held, and I did see the clashes with the police. But the demonstration was relatively small from what you would expect given the decision. We'll have to wait a few days to see if it expands.
Very briefly, Alan, what is the rhetoric coming from the Israeli people now around this war? Of course, almost 2 years have gone since those devastating October 7th attacks. Is there more frustration than there seems, or is it small pockets of discontent?
No. There's much more discontent than you would think. You look at the polls, consistently over 65%, 70 in fact, percent of the population does not support Mr. Netanyahu, wants the war to end. But there's also at the same time a level of fatigue and dejection. And people are still somewhat devastated from what had happened during the Hamas terror attack of October 7, 2023. So these demonstrations focused until now on the hostages. Right now, with the hostages' lives at stake, and even an authority like the chief of staff himself says we are endangering them beyond doubt, you may see bigger demonstrations.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, further questions could be raised about the situation for civilians living in Gaza as well. We don't have time for that now, Alan, but thank you for that insight. You will be staying with us as we move away from the Middle East and now head to North America, as the Trump administration has said that Elias Rodriguez, the man found guilty of shooting and killing 2 Israeli embassy staffers, is eligible for the death penalty. The indictment adds 2 federal counts of hate crime resulting in death and 2 local counts of assault with intent to kill while armed. This as per reports. The US Attorney General Pam Bondi will decide whether to seek the death penalty. US Attorney for the District of Columbia, Janine Pirro, has also said that FBI investigations to date indicate that the subject acted alone with the intent to commit a violent act in the District of Columbia. Let's listen in to those comments.
Attached to this indictment are further findings of the grand jury. It's designated as a notice of special findings under 18 U.S.C. 3591 and 92. This begins the statutory process and whether to seek the death penalty. This is a weighty decision. It takes time. There will be a rigorous process, after which the capital case section in the Attorney General's office will advise the Attorney General, and the Attorney General herself will make a decision regarding whether or not this office will seek death against Elias Rodriguez.
Well, of course, this situation, shocking, a shocking killing of 2 young staffers, Israeli staffers based in the United States. The situation surrounding crimes of this type, not necessarily as extreme, but targeting of Israeli places of worship, Israeli businesses, is something we're seeing happening globally. Questions are being raised, of course, about what more can be done to protect Israelis living outside of the country. We will continue to monitor this and bring you any updates on it. But we now head back to the Middle East, and the United States has presented Lebanon with a proposal for disarming Hezbollah along with ending Israel's military operation in the country and the withdrawal of its troops from 5 positions in southern Lebanon. In a cabinet meeting held by the Lebanese army, detailed steps for disarming Hezbollah were discussed. Following this, Lebanese information minister said that the cabinets approved the objectives of US envoy Tom Barrack's plan, but did not discuss it in full detail. Here is what was said.
The United States welcomes the Lebanese government's decision on Tuesday to task the Lebanese armed forces with a plan to bring all weapons under state control by the end of the year. This is an important step towards Lebanese sovereignty. We continue to watch developments in Lebanon very closely. Special Envoy Tom Barrack made it clear what the president needs to see. As long as Hezbollah retains arms, words will not suffice. The Lebanese armed forces must fully commit and act now to fully implement the government's decision. The credibility of Lebanon's government rests on its ability to match principle with practice.
And we'll now move on. China has criticised the United States for imposing steep new tariffs on India over its continued purchase of Russian oil, reportedly calling it a clear case of tariff abuse and urging restraint. The strong response came after US President Donald Trump signed an executive order placing an additional 25% tariff on Indian goods, taking the total import duty on some products to 50%. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun said China's opposition to the abuse of tariffs is consistent and clear when asked about Trump's order targeting India. According to reports, the comments signal growing unease in Beijing over the United States' trade stance towards its global partners, especially when China too imports Russian oil but was spared similar penalties. Meanwhile, Indian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Randir Jaiswal has condemned the tariffs as quote-unquote unfair, unjustified and unreasonable, and warned that New Delhi would take all actions necessary to defend its economic sovereignty. Well, joining us to discuss these comments from China and the wider implications of purchases of Russian oil and US tariff action, Gerard Alfil, a finance expert who's joining us live from Dubai. Gerard, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us. Let's first look at these Chinese comments. Of course, they are standing in solidarity with India on this issue, and this, of course, comes amidst conversations that are taking place with the US that have been ongoing about a potential China-US trade deal, or at least extension of the ceasefire that has previously been agreed. How big a step is this from China, given those conversations are still not complete?
Yes, this is actually quite surprising, maybe for many, because China and India had some diplomatic issues in the past. But here's the thing, China and India both represent 40% of the global population. China and India are both members of the BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa bloc, and both countries are the G20 members. And they want to remind, China wants to remind President Trump now that he should put the diplomatic tone on a bit more moderate level and stop threatening others, because he said they're the next ones who can be slapped with more tariffs could be China or Turkey, because also they are getting Russian oil. So here's a kind reminder, and also an olive branch, you can say, from China to India. Let's join forces and also confront the tariff route from Washington. And this is not the art of the deal, which we know from President Trump's books, but it's a bit of an escalation. And now here comes a strong response also from China, because there are already talks of a meeting between President Trump and China's paramount leader Xi Jinping. So the message is, we will not sit at the cat table here and listen to orders, but we have also a significant weight on the global stage and global economy.
Yes, absolutely. And Gerard, of course, questions have been raised by many experts about why these higher tariffs have been placed on India and not on other nations that are purchasing Russian oil. Trump has alluded to further tariffs potentially coming. But why, firstly, did he choose India first amidst 25% tariffs that have already been placed? And also, how long do you think it will take to see other tariff action?
A couple of reasons. Firstly, the US economy is already struggling. There's come some overheating here, and I think President Trump wants to distract from the fact that the domestic economy struggles. I'll give an example. In June, home sales in the US declined by 2.7%. The New York Times has reported 2 weeks ago. And this is a bad sign because normally June is the late spring buying season for home in the home sales market. Number one. Number two, if you look at the charts of the Dow Jones index, it has been rising for 5 years now. President Trump is a businessman. He knows that this cannot go for long. And also one indicator I observe is the Dow Jones Transport Index, which has been in a sideways stage, has not really been rising in the last 12 months and also since the start of the year. All goods which are produced have to be transported as well. So when the Dow Jones Transport Index is going sideways and is not rising any longer, that shows also there's stress in the economy. Number one. Number two, the tariffs on India are also so strong, and we can see this here in Dubai with the strong Indian population, Indian expat population, and Indian business community. India has gained enormous pace, an enormous share in the export market for the US. I give an example in pharmaceutical companies from Hyderabad in Telangana in the Indian region are producing cheaper, but at not worse quality, but sometimes even at better qualities than their peers in the US. So India has advanced many fronts in relation to exports to the US, and here President Trump wants to confront this with tariffs.
Yes, and Gerard, finally, India saying that they will respond to protect their economic integrity and security. How do you think that will play out?
India suffers from a low rupee. So the low rupee means you can export at a cheaper price, but also, again, coming back to the Dow Jones Transport Index, transporting goods means also you have to pay for the transport. Everything has its price. So the oil prices have been struggling a bit, but they are still in a quite expensive territory, $65 a barrel, Brent currently. And India is a net oil importer. Now, India will definitely, I think, also respond to the Chinese olive branch, as we discussed earlier, and probably join forces and they might speak here with one voice to confront the tariff route from President Trump. I think this would make sense. Also, Indian business here in Dubai, they do business with China, and they say we don't care about politics, what is going on in the background. Business is business. And India and China might join forces now for a longer period of time.
Gerard, Al, Phil, thank you ever so much for your insights. As always, so much to keep an eye on surrounding these tariff policies from the US, specifically relating to the purchase of Russian oil, a response from India and potential further sanctions. We will continue to keep monitoring that. But we move on now, and the United States has doubled its reward for information leading to the arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, now offering up to $50 million. US Attorney General Pam Bondi announced the move in a video posted on X, accusing Maduro of working with criminal groups, including the Tren de Aragua gang and Mexico's Sinaloa cartel. In response, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Ivan Gil called the announcement a media circus, claiming it was aimed at boosting Venezuela's far-right opposition. Maduro was first charged with drug trafficking by US prosecutors in 2020, when the initial reward was set at $15 million. It was raised to $25 million earlier this year and has now reached 50. Just last month, the US designated the cartel de los Soles, which Maduro allegedly leads, as a global terrorist organization. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Maduro has been involved in drug trafficking into the US for over a decade. So far, Caracas has not issued an official response. Well, that is all that we have time for, but we will be back shortly with more of your latest breaking news.
ITV Net